Let's go into some topics, though, because it's actually a Valorant topic that we can segue into neatly, because we were going to talk about this last week, but we just got into too much other stuff with VCT, which is obviously the big, quick, the thunder, the lightning, the world, everything's ending, the apocalypse, Shroud has entered fucking professional Valorant. Like, obviously this news has happened, right? Which I have to say, I initially thought, like, were they trolling with this? Like, I thought, like, is it supposed to be a joke? Is it supposed to be that he's going to be like, you know, like a playing ambassador, but he's just going to play one off? Like, they're implying this is like a real move. Here's the problem I have with this move, Anthony. I'll throw it to you first. I want to get your fresh take. The one angle I have on this that I find a bit weird is the part that seems too cynical is you've done it when essentially, like, competitively you were at your worst. So this just looks like you were like, right, well, I can't tomorrow become the best team, but I could get the most viewers tomorrow. But, you know, like, I almost feel like, because the problem is, like, I'm supposed to treat this like a sports move. Like, they think Shroud's the best player you could put in the Sentinels, right? So what's your take on this move? On any angle you take.
It's a tough one to think if Shroud's going to make the difference actually into Sentinels or not, because as you've mentioned, it's been on a downslope when Shroud started stepping down from competitive CS. He maybe wasn't performing as well as we wanted to in the North American scene, or for the teams who were playing in Cloud9 as his last team. But he's always been a prominent attack FPS or just an FPS player, and a great streamer at that. But you have to also think that the difference of him playing a brand new game in an FPS, such as, let's say, for example, fucking Call of Duty Warzone just came out, but he's just going to shit on every single kid because everybody's just learning the game. But he's mechanically just going to be that good and that much better than you. So it just looks like he's always going to be like a superstar player going into a new game. Going into Valorant, I feel that there's a little bit of both, because I thought it was a joke as well, especially when it did the interview or the announcement on the Sentinels social media on Twitter. You see him like just. It kind of like felt like he was out of his comfort zone of like how he was acting, holding his luggage. I was like, is it one of those commercials he's just going to do like this?
It's like April 1st or something. Exactly. Yeah, exactly.
So, but you know what? He's putting the time in. He's practicing. He's in the boot camp. But I think I'm still going to have to be a little bit on the edge of like not really getting into the copium of Shroud is going to be the difference for Sentinels because of past episodes that you've done with, for example, Sideshow and also Dust. The topic came up of like sometimes you just think about organizations just signing a player because they have such a prominent name in Counter-Strike, and you think that's just transferable skills. Shroud hasn't played Counter-Strike competitively in at least 5 years, 6 years, 7 years, right? So how is that going to transfer competitively into Valorant, where Valorant, yes, in the basis is an attack FPS, but there's still so much to learn, and there's so much intricacies into how you have to build your synergies to get into a role that's going to help your team succeed. Maybe because he's playing a smoke agent where, you know, a Brimstone, you pull out the iPad, you're just going to put the 3 smokes wherever you want. You don't need to do any lineups. Omen, you don't have to do that many lineups at all. And the flash is very straightforward because it goes through walls and it's a big fucking bus. If you're going to play a Viper, you're just putting a fucking wall across the map. Maybe you have to do a lineup on your orb. But technically, like the skills that you have to try to learn a new agent or the game as a controller is, in my eyes, a little bit easier than the other roles, which is why, for example, when Ethan came into Valorant, he started off as Smokes or Sage. When Nitro came into Valorant, he started with Smokes. And then later on, once you get used to the roles a little bit, you get down the line of like, okay, I can now flex into a different agent. I know the rotations, I know the timings, I know how to use the utilities, I know the lineups. So I think this is like at least a great start and a stepping stone for Shroud to get into it and involve. And he even mentioned on his stream is like he's 100% committed into Valorant. So either it's with Sentinels or not, I want to know what's part of this partnership program that's really making Shroud want to get back into the competitive scene. But is it going to be like the saving grace that Sentinels are going to qualify for champions in this LCQ? I want to go with the memes and say yes, but it's not. I think they're gonna probably be in the middle of the pack, even at the lower end of the 8 teams that are currently playing this weekend.
Right. I mean, obviously, it's open-ended. Where are you coming in on the Shroud topic here, Gio?
Yeah.
Well, my cynical theory was that Sentinels bringing in Shroud would bring enough viewership to Riot's product that it would make Riot want to put them in the partnership program.
I think a lot of people are thinking that. Yeah.
Like, but I think it's one of those things that Sentinels are in a weird place anyway, right? So it's like they know, because this is true for every team, that you go into LCQ, so you don't have like tons of time to just prep for it and whatever. So whoever you bring in, even if they're like an incredible player, is probably not going to be enough to like save the team, right? You need to have a long time with the team for that to really do enough. So how can they get the most value out of bringing someone in? Well, it seems to me like Sentinels are really trying hard to be this like 100 Thieves-esque kind of like organization where they have a lot of brand value, and a lot of their like their value comes from things outside of purely how they perform in the game. And so that will probably make them quite lucrative. I'm sure they already are, because of, how they've been so far with people like Shaz and Tens and stuff. Like, these are huge brand value players. And so bringing in Shroud, it's almost like a hybrid content creator sort of position as well. It adds a lot of value to their brand, and it means that they can be in a very good business position within this game. And if Shroud's interested in getting into Valorant, if he wants to be with an organization who are going to respect, encourage like his content creation stuff as well, and also like he's a good enough player that they can feasibly actually play in like an official with him, right? Like, he's an ex-Counter-Strike pro. He's known for the fact that he's very good at transferring between games, even just as a streamer and stuff like that. Like, he's probably not a bad choice just for like, okay, yeah, we want someone to be in the team. Like, why not him? Because if not him, it's going to be someone else who's probably a less valuable individual. So I think that in the position that Sentinels are in that, okay, well, we want someone. How can we get the most out of a someone? Yeah, let's pick up like this insane brand. And worst case scenario, we don't qualify for champions. Best case scenario, we do, and we make a fuck ton of money doing it because we have fucking Shroud. Like, for me, it's like, it does seem like a meme, and I'm sure there are probably some disgruntled people somewhere in the Valorant community who are really like hoping for their shot to be picked up by an org and feel like they've grinded it out. And I'm sure that's frustrating to some people to see that. But I feel like, as much as it is a really bizarre thing, or has felt really bizarre to a lot of people, it kind of is sort of in a weird way, like the best decision that they could have made. If this were like at the beginning of a year, then I would be like, is it the best decision you could have made? Because you could have picked up like an actual established Valorant player.
So this is also kind of like, it's the last throw something at the wall anyway. It doesn't really matter if it works.
Because it's for LCQ, right. I'm like, actually, your alternatives are going to make you less money.
Exactly. You guys talked about this during the episode, I think, with Josh again, when you were talking about the 100 Thieves roster.
This is the only guy ever who did research and actually watched past episodes to come on the show. Like, fucking hell. Okay. Go on then. I know it's ridiculous. He's like referring to it like it's Marvel Comics back in the days. Like, check episode 17 of Spider-Man.
I love your shit.
Like, I know it's.
I was watching Slinkies yesterday.
Fair enough.
I like what you're putting together. Fair enough. And Gio, this is a good show. I love these type of like interviews where you get to like deep dive into different things, and like I actually even learned a lot about, for example, how Chet was thinking about the game with FNS as well, right? Yeah. There's great actually. I'm doing promotion for your podcast right now, but
to the audience who already watched it.
Exactly, but at the same time, I feel that it's also a very very good show to be able to dig deep into the guests that you have, and you take advantage of those guests to ask the good questions, where you have the experts on that very topic that you want to talk about, which is why I have no idea where the fuck I'm here, but it's okay. But yeah, so we were talking about the 100 Thieves, where the clock was winding down, you're trying to rebuild, and you only have like 6 months left or whatever. This could be the same scenario where for Sentinels, LCQ's coming up, they have to make a change, but everybody's in jail contract, and you don't really have any free agents. And you don't really want to grind into the tier or look into the tier 2 scene yet, because yes, you have some teams and players that show promise, but do they have like the necessary grind set to be able to play into like a high octane, high like a very important match that's going to put a lot of pressure on your shoulders. Can you act around that? Can you actually learn the game fast enough in a sense that you could actually go into the different types of compositions that Sentinels will be pulling out this weekend? And not only so when you think about all of that, it's not only on Shroud, but you have to think about everybody else that they picked up, right? Zelsis is another one too, but it's also Weltis. I don't know if you know Weltis, Thorin, but he's been somebody that's been like a stats guy that's been putting a lot of stuff around for VCTs, but just doing on his own account as well for Twitter, where a lot of the stuff that he put out, like graphs of like, hey, you have 100 Thieves that have like the highest post plant success rate at like high 80%, high 90% because they're just so good at planting the spike, which is why strategically they're playing this way. As for example, Ghost Gaming is strategically and the highest percentage, one of the best teams in North America for retakes on post plants and stuff like that. So those type of stats, he's been hired to do that type of analytical stuff to support, for example, Raucus into coaching. And they also added an assistant coach with Danny, who's also a player or used to be a player that also ranked for Sentinels most recently. So there's a lot of factors and a lot of pieces that have been hired most recently into the boot camp to prepare Sentinels into this weekend. And not to go into like the meme of like Sentinels is going to win LCQ, but the reason why they could potentially get far into the LCQ is because of all of these things. And in the past episodes and just in general on Sentinels, we've always been asking for a certain change. Everybody's kind of like sick of seeing 10s on Jet, where it's like you have to follow the meta. You want to see a little bit more, the return of Astra, a little bit more Fade, a little bit more Raze. Now Zelsis, who used to play and was known to be a very good KO in version 1, has actually a really good Raze too. And in the leaked scrims that came out from 10s in like the 3 rounds that they got on Split, you saw Zelsis play a little bit more Raze. You saw 10s on a Chamber. What does that fit for the rest of the players? You still have Shaz that's going to be a great IGL that can play a flexed initiator. The only question and the biggest question is going to be what's Dapper going to play, right? Because if you have 10s playing as a Sentinel, what can Dapper play? And Dapper could potentially play that Fade or that KO. And why I think he would be good as a KO is that's one of the agents that's the most resemblance into the classic Counter-Strike where Dapper played for the longest time with E United or grinding that tier 2 scene in North America in CSGO, is that the flashes will be very beneficial for the self-plays that he wants to do or how he wants to set up Zelsis, as Zelsis was also a Counter-Strike player and they worked that ping-pong synergy of trying to trade and set up. So fundamentally, on paper, it looks like a good roster. Now, is it going to be applicable? Do they have enough time with the boot camp to actually have a deep run? Maybe not. But if this is a publicity stunt to get into the partnership program to guarantee something in the long run, they will definitely become a really strong force as a whole.
Yeah, because to me, basically, when I thought about this topic a lot, because basically, I remember when Overwatch, the same thing happened. They made the Overwatch League after they had the open scene, where you had loads of teams. It was teams like the Team Liquids of the world. They were top teams, but they didn't get into the Overwatch League, and the players went. So I've thought a lot about Valorant, because I knew in Valorant that they were going to do this halfway house approach. They're not going to a pure franchising league. They're going to essentially a bit like what we have in CSGO, where in CSGO, it's like you become like a partner of the league, so you just get the invite, but the other team can still qualify through an open qualifier and come through and win the tournament if they were like, I'll give you the example, like an Ascend would be the analogy now, like maybe they wouldn't be in the initial program, but they'd be so good, or a Paper X or whatever. So basically the problem with this topic is realistically, if you look how they pick the different teams for franchise leagues or these opportunities in the past, there's no set of rules. That's why everyone's so uncertain. Like there's basically, as far as I can tell, there's 3 angles you could get into this like program from. One is competitive, as in right now you have a really good team. Now if you're Sentinels, that used to be the case. That used to be the main thing that was going to get you in. You were the number 1 team. You're not anymore though, right? The next one I would say is like reputation of your org. And what I mean by that is like, are you a tenured org? If you're Cloud9 or you're like Evil Geniuses, your chances are just way higher, whether or not like Evil Geniuses are purposely picked because they haven't had a great Valorant team, but they're Evil Geniuses. Your chances are also brilliant. And then finally,
they also have an LCS spot. I think that
helps. Yeah, they've also got a connection with Riot as a result.
Because TSM have never been like a particularly high tier Valorant team either, but TSM have
That's one of the things people are assuming, yeah. Well, then finally, the last category is obviously just raw business ability. If you have like the right people backing you, people know you have a lot of money, you can also get in on that angle. The problem I have is this. I actually think if you look at it, this move is actually a good gamble for exactly the reason it might get Sentinels in, because as I said, Sentinels really were living off the fact that they used to be the original great team and that they have massive streamers. Well, spoiler, if you've ever seen how franchise leagues work, if Sentinels doesn't get picked up, because what a lot of people aren't going to know is, yes, they're paying big salaries. They're not like a giant esports org. If you know the people behind them, they were like involved in like LCS years ago or something. That's about it. Like, they're not like an evil geniuses. Then they're definitely not, by the way, some of the Overwatch people who are like fucking Comcast or like some giant sports team like the Philadelphia 76ers. But they're not on that level. So actually, if people don't know, it isn't as obvious. Like, a lot of fans will think it's a lock that Sentinels is. It isn't. I don't think it is. Whereas I do think if you bring this viewership and you also show that, like, look, we can even like attract big people who are going to spend money on them, I think that does help you get into some degree, because I do think actually if you're Sentinels, the angle a fan won't get is this. If you don't get in, if those players are really living like the pro life and they don't just want to be streamers, they'll just leave and go to the team that's in the program. So actually, even just having these streamers doesn't necessarily guarantee you get in, because if you know how Overwatch League worked, as soon as they made Overwatch League, everyone had to leave the teams that weren't in anyway to have a career. So it's a lot trickier than people realise. On the actual Shroud point, I found that very interesting what you said though, Vansili, because the part I actually was confused by is exactly that. When I heard Shroud's coming in, because of the whole rep of Shroud, like, I obviously know him from CSGO, but I know what the rep is. Like, he's just a god fucking aimer. I thought, well, he's obviously just coming in to be a duelist then, isn't he? And I was like, what? He's playing the smoke character. Because if you don't know the thing about Shroud, I won't make a big thing. I'll do a separate video on this topic, actually, because it's time to introduce the Valorant fans to who Shroud is. Basically, the problem Shroud had in his whole career that tortured him was that his mechanics were incredible, but actually, as the game evolved, he wasn't really someone in CS who had sort of like a super killer instinct. Like, famously, when he was on Sean Gare's teams, people used to say, him and Skadoodle, like, Sean Gares had to like micro these guys. He had to sort of tell them, like, right, push up now, like, oh, can you play a bit more aggressively on this round? The problem with Shroud to me is he's someone who, like, I don't get the vibe that, like, inside he thinks he's like Michael Jordan. He just has mega skills, but he's actually like, I know his persona isn't like this on stream, he's actually a pretty humble guy. So the issue I have is, like, I would have thought you just put him in a mechanical role and go, look, we'll do everything else. You just shoot people in the head, basically, because he obviously, by the way, is fabulously talented in that regard. If people don't know, what made the CSGO end of his career really tragic is if you watched him actually play CSGO, you could see his aim was good, but he didn't have like a great game sense. He wasn't. So I even thought as well, you're bringing him into another game. It's not like it's not like we're 10 years into Valorant. Like, he could also frag out in a game like this. He's not going to be great if he's streaming. So, like, I can see sort of why they do the move, but I have to say, I do think it's very cynically tied to, like, it's one last throw of paint against the wall, see what sticks, and then also let's just pump these viewers up and let's send a message to Riot, like, you bring our team in, we'll bring like 200k viewers to your stream. That's a pretty good message to send, by the way. That's a pretty good one. Because as I pointed out on past episodes, Gio, the problem you have is, if your team's like a version 1, by the way, it doesn't matter if you're like a top 3 team in NA, you're just not getting in the franchising, mate. Like, you're going to have some special extra reason if you're going to get in, because the problem is, like you just said there, even teams that haven't really put in the yards, like TSM, they're just waiting to be offered a slot pretty much because of the history. Because the last thing I'll say on franchising is this. I think actually it's going to be very different in Valorant than it was in the games like Overwatch. Because in Overwatch, if people don't know, it seems to me like Bobby Kotick basically gave preferential treatment to non-endemic people that he knew wanted to get into esports, like the Comcasts, like the big sports franchises. So I think in Blizzard specifically actually went away from the Team Liquids and TSMs of the world. Riot obviously has that past connection. So there's another problem for your Sentinels. You have nothing, you don't even know what LCS is in that regard. You know, that's way outside of your purview. So it's such a tricky scenario for almost everyone. Because if people haven't heard, there are already names like Complexity apparently being like declined. If people don't know, Complexity has loads of money and is partnered with the motherfucking Dallas Cowboys in the NFL. So, like, if you're not getting in, I imagine if you are Sentinels, like, we used to be good 2 years ago, you are going to be sort of like, I don't know, has anyone got any like final thing we can do to get in? Like, yeah, this is like, it's a good roll of the dice, I think.
Yeah. I mean, Complexity has that money, but they also don't have the players or the tenure of like a good Valorant team.
Your alarm's going off, by the way. Right? It's time to cast LCK.
I have to go in my room.
Like, you got a little lullaby going on. I mean, okay, I'll talk anyway.
No, keep going.
I was just, because Complexity, it's like, it's an interesting one because yes, they have a lot of money, and actually a lot of the teams use their facility in Dallas as well.
For sure,
but like, they, outside of game changes, like, I wouldn't even be able to tell you anything about Complexity in Valorant. Like,
yeah, that's the thing. Right into tier 2 scene, they had maybe Ohai in there. They had Calm. I mean, we know Calm as well from Counter-Strike. He's played like with the Flum Pugs for a very long time with Mythic, and now he's actually a pretty good IGL with Team EG. So there's been like they've kind of like been the scouting team for a lot of the players trying to find the next stepping stone.
But they might also then have a better time in the sort of like the whatever the name of the tier that's going to be below the
whatever that is,
franchise thing is. Like that might also end up being a better place for them anyway, if that is what their thing is going to be. Obviously, like if you're in the partnered part, then you get like the revenue share and everything. So there's an incentive to be there. But it makes me think that they may still get to make a bunch of money by charging these tier 1 teams to use their goddamn facility, which they're all using anyway.
And also, if they stay in the game, they might just be one of those orgs that like farms players and sells them to the fucking franchise.
Yeah.
There's that as well. You can do that too, sure.
Yeah.
Want to see more cool, funny, interesting clips based on topics from my content? Well, subscribe to this channel then, or, be a pleb and don't.